More than tens of thousands of soldiers, vehicles, and frontline positions have been lost or disabled in Ukraine, not by airstrikes or heavy artillery, but by small drones that cost less than a single artillery shell. In many sectors, FPV drones now account for a growing share of daily losses, hitting individual soldiers, light vehicles, and supply routes with speed and precision that leaves little time to react. In just a few seconds, a soldier standing in an open field can disappear from the battlefield, not because of a massive explosion, but because a quiet flying device drops or carries a single charge straight to its target. On today's battlefield, the most dangerous moments are no longer during major offensives. The real danger comes during short pauses, quick moves between positions, or brief stops to rest and resupply. The damage is not only measured in destroyed vehicles or killed soldiers. It is measured in broken routines, disrupted movement, and constant pressure that never fully goes away. What makes this wave of FPV attacks different from earlier drone videos is not how dramatic the explosions look. The difference is the method. FPV drones now hunt, follow, wait, and strike as part of a clear and deliberate pattern. To understand why this is changing modern warfare, it is necessary to look closely at how these FPV attacks actually unfold on the ground. FPV drones are now shaping some of the most dangerous moments on the battlefield by targeting individual soldiers moving across open ground, where exposure replaces protection and seconds decide survival. When a lone soldier crosses an open field, the FPV typically approaches at low altitude from behind or from the side, staying below the horizon line and avoiding sharp turns that could draw attention. There is often very small sound cue, and the movement above blends into background noise from wind and distant fighting. The soldier keeps walking, unaware that tracking has already begun. Instead of attacking right away, the FPV maintains distance and matches speed, holding the target inside the camera frame. The operator waits for a slowdown, a brief stop, or a change in posture. When the soldier hesitates or adjusts equipment, the drone accelerates and closes the gap. The strike happens at very close range, leaving no time to run, hide, or react. In many recorded cases, the attack does not come during fast movement, but during the moment when movement ends. The danger appears after the soldier believes the crossing is complete. Small groups face a similar threat with added risk. When 2 or 3 soldiers separate from a larger unit, the FPV follows from above, changing altitude to keep visual contact without committing to a dive. As long as the group remains near trees, vehicles, or terrain folds, the drone stays back. The moment they step into open ground, the FPV drops sharply toward the formation. One soldier is hit first, often the one closest to the center of movement. The remaining soldiers react instinctively, either freezing in place or breaking in different directions. This sudden movement exposes positions that were not visible seconds earlier. A single strike turns a short movement into a chaotic situation where the group loses coordination almost immediately. In several cases, the FPV does not stop after the first impact. A second drone appears moments later, exploiting the confusion and targeting the exposed survivors. Short rest stops have become another common trigger for FPV attacks. After crossing open ground, soldiers often pause to catch breath, adjust straps, or check weapons. FPV drones frequently appear during these pauses but do not strike at once. They circle at a controlled distance, maintaining visual contact while waiting for a clear opening. When a soldier sits down, removes a helmet, or lowers a rifle, the FPV commits. The drone dives fast and strikes before the target can stand or regain awareness. What was meant to be a brief rest becomes the most exposed moment of the entire movement. In several incidents, the FPV waits longer, observing for signs that more soldiers are nearby. Once additional movement is detected, the attack follows, hitting when multiple targets are present in the open. Across these encounters, the pattern remains consistent. The FPV does not rush. It follows, waits, and chooses the moment when the target is least prepared. The attack comes not during dramatic action, but during routine movement that appears safe from the ground. Open terrain no longer serves as a simple gap between positions. It becomes a monitored space where any pause or deviation can trigger an immediate response from above. For soldiers on foot, this changes how every step is taken and how every stop is judged. These FPV engagements show how individual movements are now directly tied to drone activity. The battlefield at ground level may appear quiet, but the engagement has already started in the air. Light vehicles and frontline supply movement have become prime targets for FPV drones, turning routes once protected by speed and habit into some of the most exposed spaces on the battlefield. When a single logistics truck moves along a frontline route, the FPV often appears high enough to stay unnoticed while keeping the vehicle centered in view. The drone does not rush the attack. It follows from above, adjusting speed as the truck accelerates or slows, and waits for terrain to limit the driver's options. Narrow roads, damaged bridges, sharp turns, or soft ground force the vehicle to reduce speed. At that moment, the FPV dives. The strike is aimed at the cabin or the cargo area, depending on what is exposed, and the impact often triggers fuel ignition or secondary explosions. A vehicle that took hours to load and dispatch is removed from the route in seconds. These attacks often occur far from the front line, where crews expect lower risk. The absence of immediate gunfire or artillery noise creates a false sense of security. By the time the driver notices movement above, the distance is already closed. Motorcycles and quad bikes face even greater danger. These vehicles are used to move ammunition, food, and messages quickly across short distances near the front. They rely on speed and small size rather than protection. FPV drones approach from behind at very low altitude, staying below the rider's line of sight. The drone matches the vehicle's path, keeping close enough to track but far enough to avoid sudden turns. When the rider slows, hits rough ground, or adjusts direction, the FPV commits. One impact is enough to disable both vehicle and cargo. In many cases, the loss of a single quad bike means a forward position receives nothing that day. Unlike armored targets, these vehicles do not require precision placement for success. Any hit causes immediate failure. This makes FPV attacks on light transport fast and repeatable. Vehicles parked near the front line present a different opportunity. FPV drones often detect stationary transport through patterns of movement around them. Foot traffic, loading activity, or engine heat reveals the position. The drone does not strike at once. It observes, waiting until soldiers gather near the vehicle to unload or prepare for departure. Once multiple figures are visible, the FPV dives toward the target area. The explosion damages the vehicle and strikes nearby personnel at the same time. These moments often happen during short pauses meant to reset supply flow. Instead of improving readiness, the stop becomes a point of loss. In several encounters, FPV drones return to the same route later in the day. If another vehicle attempts to pass, the pattern repeats. The road becomes a monitored zone rather than a transit line. What stands out across these cases is the focus on timing rather than firepower. The FPV does not need to destroy every vehicle. It only needs to interrupt movement at the right moment. A single disabled truck blocks a narrow road. A destroyed quad bike leaves a position undersupplied. A parked vehicle hit during unloading removes both transport and manpower at once. These engagements rarely look dramatic from a distance. There is no prolonged exchange. There is a brief approach, a sudden strike, and immediate silence. As FPV attacks continue along supply routes, movement becomes slower and more cautious. Drivers hesitate. Routes are delayed. Short deliveries turn into longer and riskier operations. The battlefield effect is clear on the ground. With only a few well-timed FPV strikes, entire sections of the supply chain can be interrupted without engaging frontline forces directly. FPV drones are now directly reshaping how shelter and defensive space function on the battlefield, as buildings once used for protection become exposed targets rather than safe positions. When soldiers take cover inside damaged houses or ruined structures near the front, FPV drones often approach slowly at low altitude, scanning walls, roofs, and open sides. The drone looks for broken windows, collapsed sections, or gaps created by earlier shelling. Once an opening is identified, the FPV moves closer, adjusting angle and speed to line up with the entry point. The explosive charge is delivered through the window or opening, and the detonation collapses part of the structure. Dust, debris, and falling material force anyone inside to evacuate immediately. A position that seemed solid moments earlier becomes unusable in seconds. These attacks rarely stop after the first hit. Following the initial explosion, the area is watched closely from above. If movement continues inside or near the structure, another FPV returns. The second drone checks the same openings, looking for signs of life, heat, or motion. When activity is detected, a follow-up strike is launched. Each pass removes more cover, breaks remaining walls, and reduces the chance that the building can be reused. What remains is a shell that no longer offers protection or concealment. This repeated approach changes how defensive space is cleared. Instead of sending infantry to search and secure, FPV drones do the work from the air. The process is gradual and controlled. The structure is stripped of its value step by step until no one can remain inside. Temporary storage sites face even greater risk. Fuel containers, ammunition stacks, and supply caches are often placed inside sheds, basements, or partially intact buildings to stay out of sight. FPV drones identify these locations through routine movement, delivery patterns, and repeated visits. Once the drone confirms stored material, it approaches carefully and releases the charge directly into the storage area. The initial explosion triggers secondary blasts that are far more destructive than the drone payload alone. Fire spreads quickly, and shockwaves damage surrounding structures. After such an event, the location cannot be used again. These strikes have immediate effects beyond the loss of supplies. Nearby positions become exposed due to heat and fire. Smoke reveals movement routes. Personnel are forced to relocate under pressure rather than by plan. In several engagements, FPV drones return hours later to the same site. If rebuilding or recovery efforts begin, another strike follows. The space is denied repeatedly until activity stops completely. What stands out in these encounters is the shift in how defensive space is treated. Buildings are no longer stable positions that can be occupied for long periods. Any structure with visible access points becomes vulnerable once detected. The longer soldiers remain inside, the higher the chance of being targeted. This forces constant relocation. Units move more often and carry less equipment. Time spent improving positions is shortened because those efforts may be undone quickly. The battlefield effect is visible in how positions change hands. Instead of being overrun, shelters are abandoned. Instead of being captured, they are destroyed or rendered unusable. FPV drones do not need to level entire blocks. By collapsing key sections and striking stored resources, they remove the practical value of shelter. As a result, static defense loses reliability, and the space available for rest, storage, and planning becomes smaller with each successful strike. On the ground, trench lines and natural cover are no longer holding as expected, as FPV drones identify weak points and strike from above with increasing consistency. When soldiers occupy a trench line, FPV drones often begin by observing daily activity rather than attacking right away. Entry points, exit routes, and repeated foot traffic leave visible patterns from the air. Small movements, shifts in position, or brief exposure at trench openings give the drone a clear reference. Once a weak section is identified, the FPV dives directly into the exposed segment. The strike lands inside the trench rather than on the edge, collapsing walls and cutting off movement. A defensive line that took days to dig can be broken at its narrowest point within seconds. This method focuses on disruption rather than total destruction. After the first impact, soldiers inside the trench lose the ability to move safely along the line. Communication breaks down as sections become isolated. What remains is not a continuous defense but a series of disconnected pockets. Trenches built inside wooded areas face a similar outcome. From the ground, tree cover blocks direct sight and gives a sense of concealment. From above, gaps between branches and uneven canopy reveal movement below. FPV drones fly low through these openings, adjusting height to stay below the tree line. The approach is slow and controlled, with the drone using shadows and terrain to remain unseen. When the target section is reached, the attack comes from above or from the side, collapsing part of the trench or forcing an immediate withdrawal. In several cases, the damage is enough to make the position unusable without fully destroying it. Soil falls inward. Support beams fail. The trench fills with debris. Remaining soldiers are forced to abandon the site rather than repair it under pressure. Movement between trench sections has become one of the most dangerous moments. FPV drones often wait during periods of low activity, holding position at a distance. When a soldier leaves cover to move between segments, the drone commits. The timing is precise. The attack happens during the short exposure window when there is no overhead protection. Even a few steps outside the trench are enough. These strikes discourage coordinated movement along defensive lines. Instead of rotating positions or reinforcing weak points, soldiers stay in place longer than planned. Over time, this creates gaps that cannot be addressed safely. Natural cover outside trench systems no longer provides reliable protection either. Bushes, shallow folds in the ground, and tree lines hide movement from ground view but not from FPV cameras. The drone tracks motion rather than shape. Any change in posture or direction stands out against the terrain. Once movement is detected, the FPV descends quickly and strikes before the target can reach deeper cover. Just like with buildings, FPV drones sometimes return to the same trench line after an initial strike. If repair work begins or movement resumes, another attack follows. As FPV drones continue to hunt these positions, trench systems lose flexibility. Static defense becomes fragile. Movement becomes limited. The ground may look quiet, but the engagement is already underway above. The impact of FPV drones begins before the first attack, as repeated appearances in the air gradually reshape behavior on the ground. In many sectors, an FPV appears overhead and does not attack. It circles at medium height, steady and controlled, remaining within sight or sound range. Soldiers notice it, take cover, and wait. Seconds pass without impact. The drone continues to orbit, adjusting position to keep the area in view. No strike follows, but movement on the ground slows almost immediately. During these periods, soldiers avoid leaving cover even when no attack has taken place. They delay short movements, hold positions longer than planned, and wait for the drone to leave. The FPV does not need to engage. Its presence alone freezes activity across a small area. When an attack finally happens, it often comes without warning. An FPV dives into a position and hits one soldier in full view of nearby teammates. The strike is sudden and precise. There is no buildup, no time to respond. The moment after impact is chaotic. Some soldiers drop flat. Others attempt to move quickly toward cover. This reaction exposes new movement across the ground. FPV operators often anticipate this response. A second drone appears shortly after the first strike, drawn by the visible movement that follows. The next attack targets those trying to relocate or assist the wounded. What begins as a single hit turns into a brief sequence where multiple soldiers are forced to move under observation. After such incidents, activity around the position changes. Movement becomes slower and more limited. Soldiers avoid clustering, even when tasks require coordination. Routes between positions are used less often. Short movements that were once routine are postponed or canceled entirely. The pressure continues even when no drone is visible. After repeated encounters, soldiers assume that FPVs may return at any time. This pattern repeats across different times of day. FPV activity does not follow a predictable schedule. Drones appear during daylight and return after dark, using the same routes and observation angles. Soldiers cannot rely on time to reduce risk. Instead, they shorten tasks and limit exposure whenever possible. Basic actions are adjusted. Supply handoffs happen faster and closer to cover. Medical treatment is performed with fewer people present. Equipment checks are delayed until no aerial movement is detected. Each change reduces exposure but also slows overall tempo. Over longer periods, these conditions reshape unit behavior. Soldiers move less often between positions. Small issues accumulate because addressing them requires exposure. The battlefield becomes quieter, not due to control, but due to hesitation. FPV drones achieve this effect without constant engagement. They do not need to strike every time they appear. By alternating observation with sudden attacks, they create uncertainty that persists even during calm moments. In several engagements, positions have been abandoned without a direct assault. The decision comes after extended periods under observation where movement feels increasingly unsafe. When units attempt to relocate, FPVs often reappear and track the withdrawal. This cycle applies pressure continuously. The threat does not peak and fade. It remains present, shaping decisions minute by minute. Through this process, FPV drones do more than remove individual targets. They influence how soldiers move, when they act, and how long they can sustain operations under constant watch. It does not end with one decisive strike or a single dramatic explosion. The real impact of FPV warfare appears only after watching the pattern repeat again and again across the battlefield. FPV drones do not win by breaking a line in one moment. They win by returning, observing, waiting, and striking at the weakest points of daily activity. Individual soldiers are hunted in open ground. Light vehicles are removed from supply routes at the exact moment they slow down. Shelters collapse not from massive bombardment, but from precise hits that make them unusable. The battlefield is no longer decided only at the front line. It is decided in the low airspace above roads, fields, trenches, and rest points, where every movement can be seen and timed. What makes this shift so serious is that it favors persistence over power. Cheap systems apply pressure continuously. Adaptation becomes harder because the threat never fully leaves. The open question now is not whether FPV drones will remain part of modern warfare. The real question is how quickly armies can adjust their tactics, training, and protection before this model spreads further. Will new countermeasures restore balance, or will low-cost drones continue to set the tempo of future conflicts? That debate is only beginning. If this analysis adds value, like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to Military Force to follow how modern warfare continues to change.